are you? Welcome to History Today. So we're going to continue with our homes in the past. Before you start this lesson though, hopefully you have completed your midpoint assessment. So it's just a couple of questions that I want you to answer before we start on this lesson. So if you haven't done that, pause the video and go and do that now. But if you have, fabulous. Let's continue. So today we're going to be looking at and exploring different objects found in a Victorian home. So do you remember last week we looked at what the Victorian homes were like and where they had their bathroom, for example, and where they had things in their living room that was a bit different to our living rooms today. And today we're going to really immerse ourselves in that and really have a look at the difference between the modern day living room and the Victorian living room, and the modern day kitchen and the Victorian kitchen. So off we go. Now here, I'm going to move my picture right up here. Here I've got a picture of a modern day kitchen. It's a beautiful drawing, isn't it? I want you to think, so you're going to have to pause the video in a minute. How many things in this kitchen uses electricity? So what I mean by that is that we have to plug it in to make it work. So it doesn't work by itself. You have to plug it in to make it work. So I want you to pause the video here, have a chat with the person in the room or with your teddy and talk about how many things in this picture use electricity. Pause the video now. Okay, did you decide? There's so many things, isn't there? We've got a microwave, a toaster, a kettle, the oven, the fridge, the lights, the washing machine, the cook hood, when you have to turn the extractor fan on, the iron, so many things. All of these things need electricity to work. And if they don't have electricity, they don't work. So the iron wouldn't get hot, the kettle wouldn't boil the water, the toaster wouldn't toast the toast, the microwave wouldn't cook the food, the oven wouldn't cook the food either, the lights wouldn't come on, so you would be in darkness. So all of these things, the washing machine wouldn't wash the clothes, would it? All of these things need electricity to work. Now, let me show you this. So, in a Victorian kitchen, there wouldn't have been any of those appliances. So there wouldn't have been a microwave, a kettle, a toaster, a washing machine, a fridge, freezer, an iron. All of those things that we have today wouldn't have been around in Victorian times. I know. Now, the reason why they didn't have any of those appliances that we have today is because there was no electricity. They didn't have plugs on the wall where they could go and put in their plug to create their warmth in their iron because there was no electricity. Those type of irons that you plug in hadn't been invented yet. So there were no washing machines or tumble dryers or microwaves or electric kettles or electric toasters in Victorian times. All the cooking was done on like a stove or a range like this. So here's our stove and here's our range, okay? And they had to build a fire every day, no matter what, every day. So then they could warm their water in their kettles. So the kettles here that you see, these are the kettles that go onto the fire. So they would put the fire here, and then they would open this part here and put in more coals to make it nice and warm. Same with this too. They would put in coals here, so then this part would be their oven. And here's a Victorian lady in her kitchen with her kettles on the top to boil the water to make a cup of tea. And to do some toast, they used to have to pop it onto a special fork and hold it in front of the fire to make their toast. So the way that we cook today is very different to the way that they cooked in Victorian times. So they didn't really have a top part of the cooker. So the hob that we can put things on. They had this part, but it was tricky to have saucepans and have the temperature at the right temperature to be able to cook things on. They did cook things on the top, but it was quite tricky. Now this is how they used to wash their clothes. Amazing. They didn't have a washing machine, because they were not invented then. So laundry was really difficult because it was all done by hand. So this woman here, what she's doing is she's using a washerboard and she is rubbing the clothes with the bar of soap on the washerboard. And she rubs it on the washboard and rubs it. And that's to get all the dirt and the stains out of the clothes. And then once she's scrubbed and rubbed and scrubbed and rubbed, she then needs to rinse out all of the soap from the water, from the clothes in fresh water, and then she has to wring it out. That means when she twists it round like that. And once she's twisted it round and she's got most of the water out, she has to put it through this contraption here. This is called a mangle. Now, these two parts here are very, very heavy rollers. And what you would do, when you see this wheel here, you would hold the handle and you would start to post your clothes through these two heavy handle rollers, and you would carefully wind the handle round. So you see what this lady's doing here? She's rolling her clothes through the mangle. And what that does is as it rolls through those big two rollers there, the rollers squeeze the last part of the water out. And then they give them a good shake and hang them on the washing line. But these were very dangerous. So if you got your fingers caught inside these two wheels and somebody rolled it, you would crush your fingers because they were so heavy and pushed together like that. So you had to be very careful. Although in Victorian times, they'd like to get children to push that through because their fingers were smaller. Would you like to do that job? No, I don't think I would either. So if that's how they did their washing, I wonder how they did their ironing. It's very different from today because remember, they had no electricity. They couldn't just go and plug their iron in. I wonder how they did ironing. Pause the video, have a chat to the person in the room. I wonder if you know how they might have done their ironing. Shall we go and have a look? Let's see. So here, I'm going to move my picture to the middle. Here, we've got 3 different types of irons that they had. So this one here was an ironing stove, okay? So ironing back in Victorian times wasn't easy at all. Irons were big chunks of iron. Iron is an actual metal. And the reason why they used iron, and that's where they get the name irons from, is because it was a very heavy metal, okay? And what they would do is they would warm their irons on the stove. Now, some people had these very special iron stoves. And can you see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 irons on this iron stove? They would make a fire inside to get it really nice and hot, and then it would heat all the outside. So you mustn't touch the outside because it would be burning hot and you would burn your fingers. And they would place the irons in different parts. And what they would do is they'd pick up the iron using a cloth and they would iron their clothes because the iron, as it had been sitting on the iron stove, had got really hot. And they would iron their clothes, and once that iron had cooled down, they'd replace it and pick another iron and use that. However, that was only for really wealthy people. People who didn't have lots of money, they would use this style of iron. And what they would do with this style of iron is they would put it in front of the fire in their home, in their kitchen, because that's generally where the fires were, and they would leave it there until it got nice and hot. And do you know how they tested to see if it was hot? They would pick it up and they would spit on it. I know. And if the spit sizzled, they knew that the iron was hot enough. It was hot and ready to go. And then this iron here, what they would do is they would use the coals from the fire and put it inside the iron so it would keep it hotter for longer. Can you see these little air holes here? That's how the heat would escape as well. And they would close the lid, shut it, and they would use that to iron. Very different from today's ironing, isn't it? I know. So Victorians as well, they didn't have fridges or freezers. So if they didn't have fridges and freezers, how do you think they kept their food cold? Shall we find out? Here we go. I'm going to move my picture down here this time. So this here and this here is called a pantry. So they didn't have a fridge or a freezer. So what they would do was they would keep it in this little room called a pantry. And in Victorian houses and houses from the early 1900s to 1930, 1940s, they would have these little rooms called pantries. And they would be quite cold. Often they would be underneath the stairs. And in the pantry, you'd have shelves around and you would store your food on top of there. However, food like bread and pies and cakes and biscuits, they were all made at home. You couldn't really buy them to eat from shops. So as soon as they were made, often they were eaten pretty quickly. Things like meat was brought and eaten straight away because you couldn't keep it cold. So it's not like going to the supermarket and buying chicken. There was no supermarkets then. You had to get your chicken from the butcher. Now, also, people would kill animals and hang them in their pantry until they were ready to eat them. And that was another thing they used to do. The Victorians loved rabbit pie, and this here is a pheasant. So they would hang them here until they were ready to eat them. Now, as well, fruits and vegetables. So you can see down here they've got some leeks, and down in here they've got some tomatoes and carrots and some lettuce. They would grow them in their gardens, and when they were ready to eat, they would pick them and put them into their pantry to keep them cool, and they would eat them. And that's why they ate quite a lot of seasonal fruits and vegetables. They couldn't eat bananas because bananas didn't grow here. Bananas were brought over from another country, so they cost lots of money. Wouldn't it be funny not to have a fridge? I bet their milk went sour quite often. Ooh, okay. So here I have a modern living room. Oh, I put myself down there. So what can you spot here that wouldn't be in a Victorian living room? Now I'm going to give you a little bit of a clue, okay? So objects like TVs, computers, games consoles, so like your Xbox and things like that, hadn't been invented in Victorian times. Remember, there was no electricity. So what they had to do different things. So they might do embroidery if you were a girl, because girls and boys did different things. It's not like today when girls can do anything and boys can do anything. It was very different then. So girls would do things like sewing and embroidery, and boys would play games, and then together they might read books, and they would also play board games together. And often some would play a musical instrument on the evening, and they would sing as well. So they might either play the piano, or they might play, say, the trumpet or the clarinet, and often they would play musical instruments to entertain them in the evening. So having a look at this picture here, look at all the lovely things that they have in the room. All the things that entertain you at home. What can you spot here that wouldn't be in Victorian times? Pause the video here. Have a chat with the person in the room. Okay, did you notice so many things? So they wouldn't have the lights, the stereo, the TV, the computers, so many things. Have a look at this picture now and look at all the things that they're doing here. Pause the video here and talk about what you can see that they're doing here. Okay, welcome back. Can you see there the lady's playing the piano, and the lady here is sewing, and these boys are playing games, and this girl is playing with this special thing where they would spin it round and it would look like the shapes inside were moving. Isn't that amazing? Now then, your task today is you're going to look at these two houses and pictures, and you're going to discuss what's the difference, and is there anything that's the same there? Okay.